Welcome to Foodytime. I'm Jay Fettigan, and this is part of my summer series. In this episode, I talk with my great friend Jon Alsop, who really helps us get some ideas about what we can all be drinking this summer. From rosés to Proseccos, cocktails in a can, the resurgence and comeback of Sangria, not to mention, do you put ice cubes in your wine? Or maybe John's got another suggestion. Enjoy. Well, Jon, thanks for taking part in this summer episode of Foodytime. What are your thoughts on summer and wine and other cocktails and hard seltzers and all the other things out there that are available?
You know, as rosé has become more and more popular over the last, I think we're talking like 10 years where rosé has become really socially acceptable and not publicly embarrassing to drink in front of other people.
Right, especially in the U.S. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. As well as the attitude towards rosé has changed, rosé has emerged into kind of a year-round drink. Mm-hmm. It's not just for summertime anymore, but it is a traditional, perfect summertime drink. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know that rosé is made from red grapes. Rosé is not white wine and red wine blended together to give it a little color.
Right.
Rosé is made from red grapes, from black grapes. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, rosé is a way of drinking red wine during the summer when maybe it's really too hot to drink red wine.
Right.
So it does have that great reputation as being a summertime wine. There's a lot of great rosés that we're starting to discover from parts of the wine world that we don't think of. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, Rioja rosé. You know, when you say Rioja, people automatically think red wine naturally.
Right.
But they also make a ton of rosé. One of my favorites is a winery called Ostatu in Spain. Muga is a huge Rioja producer. They also produce an awesome Rioja rosé. And in Rioja, it's not called rosé, it's called rosado. Rosado is the Spanish term for rosé. And so in Italy, it's called rosato. Rosato, and we're seeing a ton of great, just even Chianti rosato. And one of my favorites, and it's really easy for people to remember, is a winery called Verrazzano. Exactly like the Verrazzano Bridge. They're a Chianti producer in Tuscany, and they produce a killer rosé.
People often talk to me about their aha bottle of wine in their life. You know, and when I was a teenager traveling with my folks, and we were actually traveling in southern France, and we were having lunch with my father's friends, Georges and Suzanne. And Georges said, because I was saying I was young, I didn't really like wine, and he had them serve up a bottle of Tavel rosé, just the classic French rosé.
Right.
And, and then I had some fresh Dover Sol, and it was like bing, a light bulb went off over my head as a teenager. And it's like, wow, I understand now. I know that everybody has that aha bottle, but rosé was mine.
Yeah. Well, and again, we're talking about, even though the south of France, Provence, Languedoc, very big in rosé, Tavel is Côte de Rhône rosé.
Right.
And Côte de Rhône we think of as a predominantly red wine. Mm-hmm. So this rosé has a lot of red wine personality and a lot of red wine characteristics. So just like Côte de Rhône, Tavel can be Syrah, Grenache, Mourvèdre, so Bourbalanc, other crazy other great. I know. That sounds like a character from the Commedia dell'arte. But again, blending grapes that no one's ever heard of, and from being blended, they're just a lot more. They're just a lot more interesting.
In my opinion, it is the best go-to summer wine because you serve it chilled. It's complex enough to hold up to just about any meal, and yet at the same time, like I said, you could just sit out back with some cheese and crackers and friends, and just sip away to your heart's content.
And in the south of France, the classic food and wine match of rosé is garlic. So like really garlicky. Think about really garlicky bouillabaisse. Think about the million clove of garlic chicken. These are that flavor specifically.
So anything with too much garlic.
Exactly. Well, Yves' old boyfriend, who was from the south of France, he used to say, "Oh, and if you eat garlic and drink rosé, you get this macrobiotic reaction to where you don't get garlic breath from it. Like the rosé cancels out, on a biochemical level, the garlic." Which is absolutely not true.
Yes, because I find people that eat too much garlic tend to think they don't smell of garlic anymore because they just numb their senses.
well, and you're in the south of France. You're eating garlic. You're surrounded by people eating garlic. People are saying to each other, "Hey, how's my breath smell?" And they're like, "Fantastic."
Well, plus there are the lavender bushes and the rosemary all around you, and all of the other. Very few places in the world smell as nice as the south of France.
Right, absolutely.
It's as crazy as that is to say, but it's.
I know. I know. But we too have traveled there, and a lot of people have traveled there.
Yeah.
And man, if you go for a walk in the woods, like the underbrush is all rosemary and thyme and sage and chervil and oregano and all of these wild herbs that are just growing wild like weeds.
Right.
When you get back to the hotel, your shoes smell fantastic.
It's true.
They really do. I mean, you think about our underbrush being, clovers and grasses, and you don't really get that, at least here in the U.S. in general.
Right.
But yes, kind of a unique experience from a walk in the woods.
So you're saying rosé sales are up, which is counter to what's happening in general in the wine business, because the competition from other things, other drinks, is just opened up entirely new markets that didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago.
Well, and other drinks and the attitude that young people have towards alcohol and towards drinking is changing, or is changed, or is at least different from 100 years ago when I was a kid.
Right.
100 years ago when I was a kid, you couldn't wait to get your own apartment. You couldn't wait to get a driver's license.
Yes.
You couldn't wait to start, buying beer on your own. And all of those things are apparently things that young people are not necessarily super interested in.
That's right. Yes.
And young people's attitude towards alcohol, towards drinking, and just the place that it holds in the process of growing up. The process of we couldn't wait to start smoking. I mean,
right.
I know this sounds like it's a podcast from the Civil War or something. We couldn't wait to start smoking and drinking and driving and
That's right.
having 6 roommates in a 2-bedroom apartment. So it's just very, very different, and it's true. There are many more things. Cocktails are much more interesting,
right,
to people. The craft brew section of the liquor store, I always find that's a great education for me, because when I'm standing looking in incomprehension at all of these different craft brews.
Right.
I realize that's what it's like for a normal person to go into a wine shop.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
exactly.
So it really, it's really good for me to get that experience too.
It's a grounding, it grounds you.
Grounding and humbling, because,
right.
and then someone comes up and says, "Can I help you?" And I just say, What am I seeing? What am I looking at?
Right.
What is it?
Well, and so the craft brews, which I'm not a huge beer lover, but I'm beginning to become a beer lover because there's so many different and unique flavors out there that beer has become for me now almost as interesting as wine in terms of the variants.
Yes.
And now there's also this huge a movement with these hard, or what are the hard seltzers? Is that what what do you call this category?
Well, so I went to a tasting last week, which is a wine and seltzer tasting.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got to admit, when I think about spiked seltzer, spiked soda, my attitude could not be any worse. Okay, I mean, vodka and soda, is that not the most boring cocktail in the history of the world? So what are we talking about here? We're talking about polar seltzer with like half a shot of vodka in it.
Right.
That just sounds hellish.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, my consciousness got raised a little bit. Well, actually a lot. This tasting, because this segment of the market, you might call it hard seltzer or spiked seltzer, is really evolving. So first of all, Dogfish Head, the distillery, that we traditionally think of as a beer producer,
right, is kind of a boutique-y beer, right?
More like a craft
beer, right? Yes.
They are making all kinds of awesome canned cocktails. And some of it is on one level is vodka and soda, but great tequila margarita, a rum Mai Tai.
In a can.
Vodka mule in a can. And not a, what's the size of a beer can? Is that
12 ounces?
12 ounces. So this is a little smaller scale can. So it's a little bit smaller. The alcohol levels are about 7%. So, 20 years ago, 7% would have been twice the alcohol of beer. Today, 7% is right there in the beer alcohol range.
Right.
And like a lot of people, like I enjoy, don't get me wrong, I enjoy beer. Some of these heavier, stronger, more intense beers,
right,
I find them spectacularly filling.
Yes.
How to put this? Inflating.
Yeah.
It's just, to drink one of these intense IPAs. That's a lot. Or like a peanut butter and jelly brew. That's just a lot. That's a big glass of beer. And these sorts of cocktails, because the alcohol level is super low, a lot of people find tequila to be a little bit too intense as a flavor.
Right.
Here, it's very, very subdued. Some people find rum to be too intense of a flavor. In this rum Mai Tai, it's much, much more subdued. And I found myself, as I was tasting these, actually feeling like, the flavor is very different from beer. But I found myself feeling like I would rather drink this than drink beer. Especially on a hot, hot summer day. So that really changed my worldview. I am now much more open to the. Another one that I tried that I really liked was from. Okay, so the brand is called Sun Cruiser, and it's iced tea. They call it iced tea vodka, and it is essentially vodka with iced tea. And again, the vodka flavor, which is already extremely light, is very, very subdued. And they make a whole range of teas, as you could imagine, sweet tea, kind of almost like an Arnold Palmer-ish, right? Tea with lemonade, sort of flavor, but really, really, really good stuff. And I found myself first of all embarrassed at all of the smack I had talked about these canned cocktails. In my ignorance, all of the smack that I had talked about, I found myself a little embarrassed. And like I said, I found my consciousness raised a little bit. I'm much more, next time I go shopping, next time I'm out someplace, I'm going to be much more open to trying something like that and giving that a go.
Of course, there are Proseccos and Cavas, which are my particular favorite for sitting in the backyard and drinking. And it comes in such a huge variety of flavors and price points, and so that I think that's a great way to go in the summer.
Well, and this is one of the things that people like about Prosecco. If you've had Prosecco and you've had fancy schmancy French champagne. Prosecco is much less carbonated. One of the things that French champagne and champagne style sparkling wines are famous for is the character of the carbonation, the architecture of the carbonation, the edginess, the rigidity. And so champagne tends to have a lot more CO2 in it than Prosecco, and that's one of the things that people like about Prosecco. As you said, it is softer and softer, it's rounder, it's easier, it's not as sharp, it's not as angular.
Right.
And it's a little bit easier to drink, and in some ways a little bit more like wine, and in some ways better with food. Because of that.
Sure. When we were in college, you used to throw a bunch of fruit and
call it sangria.
Exactly. But sangria is actually also coming. There's a bit of a revolution going on.
Yeah, very much. Again, as the doors are opening for different sorts of beverages to be reevaluated and maybe to get more respect than they have in the past. Sangria is starting to come on as well. One that I tasted the other day, it's a sangria called Lolea. So it's like Olay, but with an L and an A at the end. Lolea. And I'm telling you, it was, wine snobs are going to totally turn their nose up at it.
Right.
It's a wine-based cocktail, wine, fruit juice, herbs, some carbonation. It was quite sweet. There was a white Lolea sangria and a red Lolea sangria, and the red was drier and was more like wine. The white version was quite sweet. I mean, absolutely delicious, and would be great as a dessert. Dessert wine. Now we see this with a very light sort of white cheese, fruit, some sort of like fruit cut, some kind of cold custardy thing that you might be having with dessert. And it was just, and again, just fantastic tasting. And some people have this attitude that, the greatest wines ever made are undrinkable. That they're so intense, they're so bizarrely flavored and tasting like earth and hamster cage. But these wines, these sangrias, just tasted just great, and And again, lower in alcohol, right? It's not all wine. There's also sparkling water in there. There's also fruit juice in there. You start out with an 11% wine, and by the time you get done, you're down to 7-8%
right
alcohol, which is also something that you want on a summer day.
Well, this has been great. Anything that you wanted to talk about that we did get to? Is there more on your list?
Well, one thing that comes up all the time in terms of wine in summer is people who put ice cubes in their wine.
Yes,
we all have these people in our lives. We all know these people. I do not judge them too hard, but other people definitely do.
Yeah.
In addition to the ice cubes diluting the wine and changing the flavor, which is bad.
Right.
Probably the worst part is the stuff that people say about you while you're in the bathroom. The smack that people will talk about people who put ice cubes in their wine is just unending. So one thing, and I'm sympathetic because it's hot outside. People want their wine cold
and really cold,
and they're just doing what you do when you have a beverage that you want cold. I mean, they're trying to make it the way they like it so that they can enjoy it. And on one level, you got to respect that. But what we do around here, rather than using ice cubes, is that, and I have some in the freezer right now. Get some green grapes. Get some black grapes. Pull them off the pod and freeze them. Freeze those grapes and use those as ice cubes.
Right.
And then you don't get the same diluting factor. And summertime, when we're out on the patio and it's 85 degrees out and the red wine is 85 degrees. I mean, red wine doesn't like being too warm.
Right.
Sort of loses its dignity when that happens.
Right.
And so, a frozen black grape in a glass of red wine can kind of bring that temperature down.
Right.
And make that much more pleasant too. So.
And there are all these other types of non-water-based ice cubes out there that you can freeze that that don't produce water when they warm up.
Right. Well, and typically those are kind of traditionally reserved for whiskey.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
They'll call those Scotch rocks.
That's right. But you could use them.
You can use something like that as well.
And one thing one experience I had with you many years ago when we were at the Sterling at their big deck out there. I don't know if you remember this. And it had to be 95 degrees out there. It was just unbearable. And they were serving these big, huge red, they were the Zinfandels, weren't they?
Zinfandel, Cabernet, and Sterling, famous for their monster red.
Yes. And I remember sitting across from you, and I'm not expecting this to be an enjoyable situation, because it's like 95 degrees, you're baking in the sun, it's incredibly hot, drinking these wines that are warm because they were sitting out in the sun.
Right.
And
they're room temperature.
And it was one of the best red wine experiences I had in my whole life. It was like, I don't know, it was like, it was almost the equivalent to like eating food that was too spicy and hot and really loving it. And the wine and the heat and everything else, the flavors were just out of this world.
We're just popping.
Yeah.
Right. And again, with that higher temperature, much more volatile.
Right.
The higher temperature also changes, the technical term for it is receptor uptake. Meaning the chemical reaction that happens on your tongue. And if you're drinking a 40-degree Fahrenheit beer, that chemical reaction is going to be very subdued. But the day you described, we're tasting this much warmer wine, so it just made everything much more vivid.
Yeah,
much more vivid and much more intense.
And completely contrary to what my level of my expectation was.
Yes.
and something that still stays with me to this day. I can still remember what those wines tasted like and what everything smelled like, and the whole experience. It was
well, and the people from Sterling would say, "Well, we make wine that's so great."
It's true.
You can drink it at any temperature, even the wrong temperature.
yeah, exactly. But that was one of the standout moments that I can think of from that trip. It was amazing.
Yeah,
well,
that was incredible.
Well, Jon, this has been great as usual, and I love you always show up prepared. I think that which I appreciate.
Yeah, I hate talking about wine.
I can tell.
What a chore.
All I know is I'm thirsty. I'm ready to go pop some Prosecco and have some lunch.
Go for it.
Great. Thanks, Jon. That was terrific.
Thank you. Have a great summer, everybody.
Well, I love how prepared Jon always is for one of these episodes. He comes up with so many great suggestions. And frankly, I'm going to try some of the things that I'd never even thought of before, like maybe some of those mixed drinks or hard seltzers. Not sure about the sangria part, but you never know. Anyway, we'll see you next time on Foodie Time.